We're live.
Greetings.
Now it looks like we're live.
We're so happy you're joining us today. We've got a new setup, so it might be a little bit unusual, but this is Creating Zola Mondays, sponsored by and on behalf of the Association of Black Psychologists. I'm Linda James Myers, moderator and elder, and we have two other of our regular panelists with us today as we celebrate Black History Month. So, do you want to introduce yourselves?
We sure do. I'm Harvey Linder. I'm a clinical psychologist in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a member of the ABSI Ethics Committee and a number of other things. So we'll talk more about those things later. Jojo.
Sorry, trying to figure this out. My name is Dr. Jonisha Hickson. I am a school psychologist in Washington, D.C., also serving as the public relations for the Association of Black Psychologists and the DC ABSI vice chair. So I'm really excited about this new platform. We are live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So hopefully,
Oh dear.
Meta's been hating on us. So we're trying something new. So thanks for your patience, y'all.
We do appreciate that, and so happy you're here today on this first day. No, actually, the first was a couple of days ago. Anyway, this is Black History Month, and as you know, we never celebrate Black History just as a month. We know that history began with Black history, so we're going to go back to the historical beginnings of humankind, which then is the foundation for any kind of Black history. Oftentimes we are fed a westernized version of history, and probably it makes sense that people think history begins when they begin, but we know as Black people, history began thousands of years ago, and we have the early historical records to prove it. And so I think this Black History Month, we want to first give honor to Alkebulan, which is the African people's name for themselves, which means mother of civilization. So giving honor to those who came before, we know ancestors in that language, the Medu Neter, means those who came before us. So we want to begin by giving honor to those ancestors, those who came before us. With that in mind, I'm going to share just one point that I think is also in people's minds today, with so much going on in the world, in the US, and so many challenges faced from California to the East Coast. We are in a time of change and transition, but we want to be able to see the good. We have to be able to find the good in it. So Creating Zola Mondays is dedicated to Zola, which we have described as love and productivity and all things good, that will ignite in Gola, which is that electric vibratory energy that heals. So with that in mind, we want our conversation today to be about a celebratory, but also a conscious acknowledgement of all the challenges we're facing. But as we have in the past, we face many challenges and we have triumphs. So we want that tradition to continue. I'm not sure who wants to share first, Dr. Linder or Dr. Hickson.
I'll share some of my initial thoughts because we saw like this huge onslaught of this current administration just coming for people's rights left and right, deleting people's identities off of federal pages and banning people and doing all this stuff. So Black folks, we're very prophetic. So we were already like, we know he's going to come for Black History Month. So when it happened, it was so funny because it was just like, nothing, we expected it. So everybody was still celebrating. I think Black people are the funniest people in the world because social media was just hilarious, just, celebrating and uplifting our culture from fashion and music to sports and the way that we dominate in multiple different fields. Like, I don't know, it feels like this is a very poignant moment to be Black in America. So I'm just taking joy in that because it's like, not to say I told you so, but it's interesting to see how other people are protesting in juxtaposition to us. And I saw a really interesting tweet and discourse about like why are Americans not protesting? Like why are you guys not burning down Washington D.C. or the country? And they were like, and somebody posted like they're waiting for Black people to do it, and it's like no, like excuse me, I'm relishing in this like resting and taking things in and seeing how other people will move because we've long been, at the forefront of the revolution, and people have not stood in solidarity with us in praxis. There's been a lot of performative activism, especially after that age of George Floyd, where people were marching with us, and that we saw a decline in that support. So I don't know. I'm just happy to be here in Black.
Yay, me too.
We are also not surprised. I mean, we're not surprised that, they're coming for us, they're coming for our history, they're coming for our rights. It is not a surprise that this has happened before. It will continue to happen until, they say that people who don't know their own history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that as Americans and as citizens of the world, we're just, repeating the mistakes that have been made in history that we haven't learned our lesson from. And so I think that this is another learning opportunity for everyone, and it's a learning opportunity this time that won't be just shared by us as as Black people or people of color, but I think that this is an opportunity where everybody is going to get to see some of the pain that gets created by not knowing your own history.
Thanks for sharing those thoughts. I agree with what each of you have said. What's happening is not new. What we see that may be new to some who haven't really known our history is that the same mindset that brought us to the Americas as Black people, as African people, is the same mindset that is alive and well today. It's just that the crystallization of that mindset has centered around the wealthy elites, and they have an agenda set forth that's being manifest in predictable ways. But you have to learn how to hear what's really being said. Because if you just pay attention to the words, you're going to be totally deluded. Actually, you can flip those words and probably figure out better what's really happening. So, making America great again is problematic. It looks like what's happening is making America no longer exist. And I think that's a frightening idea to many. But I think part of what you said, Dr. Hickson and Dr. Lindner, is really speaking to a revolutionary energy that's kind of dominating not just the US of A, but the entire planet. And what we want to do is expand our consciousness to a way of being and seeing the world that allows us to continue our historical path of transcending all intentions of destruction.
It's interesting. It's because we don't know our history that we mistakenly see the separations between peoples of the world rather than seeing the commonality. If we knew our history, we would understand that we're all African people, more or less, and that we all have, a common heritage and a common destiny, and we keep running away from that. We keep running away from the likeness and paying attention to the difference and not seeing ourselves as a common humanity. And part of that is not knowing your history. I remember having a conversation with the gentleman, I can't think of his name, but he was the guy who led the effort to start the the Museum of African American History in Washington D.C. And a lot of you have visited that museum. But he was talking about the process that they went through to try to raise the money to get the museum built, and the barriers that they kept running into, because they wanted to really have it as a museum of not only African American history but African history. Yeah, the African American history goes back into the continent of Africa for thousands and thousands of years. But initially, they ran into a lot of opposition from donors who wanted it to only focus on the American experience of history, which is shortcutting, the reality of the history that brought us to this point in time. And eventually, they were able to raise enough funds to get the museum built and supported by focusing on the American experience of the history that we've gone through, rather than adding they figured that if we can get the museum built, we can add an African wing later and then build on that and build out from there. But it's this notion of the West trying to turn its back on its African origins that keeps getting in the way of us realizing our humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that comes to mind as I'm listening to Dr. Linder is this whole notion of globalization and how the African American History Museum is kind of focusing on the American aspect, which is very limited, and globalization, which is happening and taking place, is really fostered by, again, that same mindset that brought us to the Americas, the wealth and greed and individualism, the forced labor and exploitation of African people. And to the extent that that mindset of materialistic greed and individualistic self-interest is so pervasive today, what we find happening is that mindset has at some point seemingly disengaged from nationalism. and the big money's global, okay? So don't be deluded about what's happening in America today. And what's happening in America today, as Dr. Hickson pointed out earlier, is we might be the first to take the brunt, but guess what? This hit is going to be, as one of my schizophrenic clients used to say, worldwide and universal. So right. Be ready.
If we take a hit, we're just going to be the canaries in the coal mine.
As we've always been. But guess what? We're still here.
And we will be here.
Can't hear you, Dr. Hickson. You are muted.
Oh, sorry. I was agreeing. I said, yes, we will. And I was also just thinking about, just reflecting on my time at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. The next comment that I'm about to make is separate. It is my own comment. It doesn't have anything to do with ABPSY. But I remember I was in class and we were talking, it was the social basis of behavior, a sociology course essentially. And I was like, we were talking about dictatorship and authoritarian, like basically fascism. And I was drawing comparisons between what I was seeing from Trump and Hitler. And one of my colleagues who was a Jewish identifying person got so offended. They were a white Jew. They were like, don't ever compare anybody to Hitler. That's so messed up. Da, da, da. And I was just like, whoa, like I was just asking, posing a question. I wasn't trying to be offensive. But now, like years later, when I am seeing some of these divisive policies that he's doing, it's like, I know as somebody who, operates in movement spaces that we've long been in what feels like a fascist regime under the guise of democracy, but now it's just so glaringly obvious that's what America is trending towards, right? We're mass deporting people or trying to. Now there's talk about Trump creating essentially concentration camps at Guantanamo Bay. They're trying to get rid of any source of identity or sense of identity that seems other, right? That's not like white, middle class. So it's just like, this is so interesting to be a part of. First of all, as a millennial, I'm tired of living through life-changing events, right? There's just too many things going on. I just want a normal adulthood, but it seems like this is our new norm. So it's craziness, madness.
I hate to tell you, JoJo, but we're all going to be living through life-changing events. And we're always going to be living through life-changing events. But that's not a bad thing. That's
And I
there
think
are a
it's
lot of things in life that need to change, and so we're going to be, experiencing that. We have, as Black psychologists, we have to um, figure out what our role is in influencing that change, and taking it to the place where it needs to go, rather than just reacting to what's happening.
absolutely true. In fact, an Africological analysis would say we're going to ask different questions, and we're going to answer those questions from our own cultural frame of reference, which will be very different than what we normally hear. And so I think that's one of the advantages of having Creating Zola Monies, because a lot of people have never heard an analysis based on our cultural frame of reference. But I think it's important, particularly at this day and time, because one of the things we have to acknowledge is the leadership we currently have is the leadership that I guess at least a small majority of Americans chose. And that leadership's not doing anything differently than they said they were going to do, even though while they were running, they said they weren't going to do it, and that denied or disavowed. But if we assume what's happening is what's designed to happen, then much like we oftentimes hear people say, oh, public education is so bad for our children aren't doing well, oh, it's horrible. Well, yes, that's true, but it's also true it must be doing what the people who have control of it want it to do. And I think we have to step back at some point and say, oh, whatever's happening is horrible. Yes, it is, but it is exactly what the powers that be intend to happen. And you judge that not by what you're being told, but by the outcomes that are going to be the natural consequence of the decisions being made. So we need to begin to look at not what's happening in terms of what people say it's supposed to be happening, but rather what are the outcomes? What are the consequences of the dismantling of civil liberties? What is the consequence of those laws and regulations that were put in place to ensure civil rights? What is the consequence of those being dismantled? And the consequences are not good necessarily, but sometimes things happen when we don't really see how there could be good coming from that. And we're forced to see not what we would like to think is happening or what we're told is happening, but see things for the way they really are. And that has to be an important step for humanity, because otherwise we're in denial. We're in denial. So this is forcing us to come out of denial. And as Freud said, denial is one of the chief mechanisms people use to defend against their own issues, denial and projection. So we're seeing an awful lot of that. Not that that's universal for all people, but it's certainly true for the Western world in terms of how their culture is situated.
I think that our task as Black psychologists is to understand the psychology of what leads people to do things that are not in their own best interest. Um, and what is the motivation? What is the thinking process that allows them to do those kinds of self-destructive things, not seeing them as self-destructive, so that we have to see beyond. We have to see beyond the point where we're just reacting to what's happening, and get to the point where we understand the process of what's happening, so that we can guide that process in down a different track.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, I was so tickled. I was so pleased when it was February 1st and Black people were cutting up on Twitter and all the social media platforms, posting the video of the I forgot where it happened, in Alabama, where the Black people were using chairs to defend themselves. And then celebrating, our accomplishments, from, again, sports stars to pop culture to people getting Grammys and things like that, because it was, for me, it kind of gave a message that, like, we're not even about to fool with y'all. We're not entertaining this. You can say you're banning Black history, but we know whose we are and who we are, and we're going to maintain our joy even in the midst of this chaos. So, like, yes, there are things going on in the world. There's craziness. There are planes falling out of the sky and people dying in fires. But while we acknowledge that strife, we can still know joy, and we can still center joy, because that's our DNA, right? Like, we're able to transmute that pain into joy. And so I think that's why I was so pleased when I saw all of the memes about Black History Month. I'm like, this is it. Like, this is what it's about, being able to be, or to have a multi-dimensional experience where we are holding joy and sadness and determination and reservation and liberation and things like that. So I don't know, I was very pleased with how people were coming out celebrating Black History Month.
Well, I'm pleased that you're pleased, because I don't follow social media, so I didn't know that was going on. Yay, all praises to those who are standing forth in terms of what has always characterized Black history. We've always been at the forefront of civil rights and justice and truth. And we've been very unselfish in terms of giving to the rest of the culture, rest of the society, those rights and liberties, even though most of the pain and suffering has been on our backs. But that historical legacy is one that we will have to carry forward, and we will always carry forward. And there's nothing that can happen to really destroy it, although that very well may be the intention. Maybe very well may have always been in the intention, but it hasn't happened, and we have no reason to think it will happen, because whatever that spiritual force is, that ancestral force is, that allows us to be here to have this conversation, it was in the beginning, it is now, and ever shall be. But getting back to Dr. Lindner's question or point, what causes people to make choices or support decisions that are clearly not in their best interest? I refer back to Hosea, who said, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge." It's a lack of knowledge. And that lack of knowledge has been denied people by design. Some people say, "Oh, I like uneducated people." Well, why? Why would you not want everyone to be fully educated? Oh, is it because people are highly educated, are hard to manipulate and hard to deceive and hard to fool? Okay, well, I get it. I guess you want to be able to control and manipulate people at will because they lack the knowledge. And a part of that lack of knowledge requires that you deny them access to the truth of Black history, to the truth of who Black people are, to the truth of the biogenetic, archaeological, linguistic, anthropological evidence that all of humanity comes from Black people. So for those who have a vested interest in keeping people ignorant and unaware and not capable of the kind of in-depth analysis and insights that are needed to be liberatory to our hearts and minds. You can only keep up that for so long. But at some point, people are going to say, hold up, wait a minute, what is this? And I think we're at that point in time. And I'm so glad that Jonish is bringing to our awareness that young people get it and are celebrating through the social media. But I wonder, and with this new modality, I don't know if we have any messages in the chat or if we have any responses based on our conversation so far.
Yeah, we just have some people telling us where they're joining from. We have actually one of our newly appointed membership chairs for the newly chartered ABSI chapter at Morehouse, I think he said. He was from Morehouse. And then people just, agreeing with some of the comments, talking about the Montgomery Brawl, where they were using chairs to defend themselves and pushing white people in the water. But no questions, comments, or concerns so far. But Nana Linda, when you were talking about that comment, that people are hurting for a lack of knowledge for themselves, I heard that a lot, and I know that, right? We know that Dr. Marcus Garvey said that none but ourselves can free us, something about the mind. So we know that consciousness is tied to this idea of liberation. But I was also thinking about diurnal logic, right? That's always on the forefront of my mind. And I felt like sometimes when I hear people say that, like that we as Black people don't know ourselves, I get a little bit defensive because I'm like, I know myself, like I know my African self, even if I don't have the language, right? And I'm coming to find that more and more as I age. So these ideas of like the virtue of Maya and Ujima and Nia and all this other stuff, I knew all those values. I was taught those values, but I didn't necessarily use that language to call it that. So it's like, I love Black people so much. And I feel like we do know ourselves, but we have to be able to do what we're doing here and raise consciousness so we can have the language to realign ourselves with our like inherent values. So I guess it's like we know ourselves, but we don't know that we know ourselves. So that's why it's really important that we have this consciousness raising piece to come on back home to ourselves. But I say all that to say no comments, questions, or concerns so far.
Okay. Well, it's absolutely true. The truth is in us. It's in our epigenetic memory, in our DNA. But it's been so layered with lies and misinformation and people denying us access to the truth. And our fight for making the truth of our history and our culture known, that you can't fault people if they've been denied access. You can't put me in isolation and then blame me because I don't know my history and my culture, when you cut it off and then imposed on me a false history and cultural values that don't resonate with me, have never been a part of my cultural ancestry. But I think you're absolutely right to bring up this notion of diurnal logic, because it's not either or, it's always both and. So we have both been denied access, yet we have generations like mine that come out of the 70s saying, oh, no. I started to say, hell no, but no, we're not going to have it. We will bring into this social context, including higher education, knowledge of our history and culture. And unfortunately, what we didn't anticipate is, and should have, but now we know, is that while higher educational institutions allowed that because they were kind of forced to, with all the students demonstrating whatever, they had a plan. It was a 50-year plan. They said, okay, we'll give this to them now. We'll pretend like we support it. But all the while, we'll control and manipulate what the outcomes are. And 50 years later, it'll be dismantled because we've controlled who the leadership is, who gets the mic, who gets published, who gets venerated. So now that we know that's the plan, it's very effective. It was instituted during chattel enslavement, probably instituted prior to that led to our being here. We have no excuse now. and the knowledge is there. The question is, are we ready to see it and hear it and know it and expand our consciousness to wrap around the way forward, which is different than what we've been socialized to believe.
I think that's very important. That's very important for all of us to realize what you just said, Dr. Myers, is that the truth is in us. The truth is with us. It has been passed down to us over generations. It's buried in our culture. It's buried in our song. It's buried in our dance. The truth is there. We have to learn to interpret it correctly, because we've been led down a path that causes us to misinterpret our own truth. And so that's what we have to relearn about how, you know, how not to misinterpret, the truth that's in us, to see it and to appreciate it for what it is and for what it can do.
Absolutely.
Because most of us have been miseducated to misinterpret our own history, our own truth, our own, value, our own, and they're trying to do it again. They're trying to take away, Black History Month and take away, the teaching of, of Black history and the teaching of our culture, and so that we don't rediscover, ourselves.
I think that's so important. Were you going to say something, Dr. Hickson? I think that's so important because what certain people understand, the people who are really behind taking these things away, not the people who we see in television and the night news, but the people who are really, I call them the puppet masters. Why would they not want us to know? The issue isn't us. They know as Black people, we've always embraced our history and culture. But what they don't want, or who they don't really want to know our history, are their descendants. Yeah, if our descendants don't know, so what? But the real agenda is we can't have their descendants to know, because once you begin to see the unification of all humanity, then you create space for people to say, oh, wait a minute, is this the kind of humanity we want to see manifest? Where you're separating children from their families, where you're setting in place a system where we can't afford to feed our children, where you're taking away what little resources people had to feed their children, or taking away their education, or assaulting Mother Nature. So now we have climate change that we can't roll back unless we change our behavior. You're putting in place systems that are going to make the rollback even more profound. So the last thing that certain puppet masters want is for people to be awake and for people to know, we are one humanity. And I need to stop looking just locally or nationally, let me say it that way, continue to look locally, that's very important, but national, I need to look globally and see what's happening and see what role we have played as the US of A, and see how we might want to shift and change to a value system that's been an integral part of our African cultural heritage and ancestry, which is standing for truth and justice and righteousness. That's what Black culture does. It stands for truth and justice and righteousness. That's what's characterized our cultural heritage at the level of cultural deep structure since the beginning of the wisdom tradition of African deep thought. And so when you're trying to figure out what does it mean to be Black, go to the cultural tradition of what that means. How have we behaved historically, even in the midst of total attempts at our dehumanization? And there you'll be able to tap into that which is within you that is going to lead to triumph and the expansion of your consciousness, so that your experience can bring some of that joy that Dr. Hickson keeps referring to.
And embracing those values is not just for the benefit of Black people. it's for the benefit of humanity. And so that's what people have to see, that, we're not doing this just for ourselves. Well, in a sense, we are doing it just for ourselves, but we recognize that ourselves extend to all of humanity. And
Absolutely
people
true. We have
haven't learned that. And, we need to help teach that.
absolutely true. Did we have a comment, Dr. Hickson?
Yeah, I don't know. Have you guys heard the song "It Just Won a Grammy" by Kendrick Lamar, Not Like Us? Have y'all
Not
heard
like
that?
us.
Yeah. It's like really popular and it's
I'm
like
not
they not
hip
like
like
it.
everybody.
Would you
Can you
say
hum
that,
a few
Linda?
bars?
I wish I could play it on here. We're gonna figure out how to play music on here. It's gonna be
He
crazy.
just won a Grammy, right?
Yeah, he just won a Grammy. So it was a song in response to a Canadian rapper Drake and their ongoing beef. And basically Kendrick is like, um, it's basically an ode to Black culture. And it's calling people out for cultural appropriation. So in the song, he calls out this Canadian rapper who is biracial. He's Black and white, but he calls him out for basically appropriating rap culture and using Black rappers and um, Black epicenters like the Mecca, Atlanta, Texas, stuff like that, Compton, to kind of promote his music and to like steal the styles of Black artists. So one of our comments was that if Kendrick Lamar provides the theme music for our modern day movement, who did it in the past and what were their messages? Because Kendrick has a verse where he's like, back in the day, the settlers or the colonizers utilized the town people to make them richer, to capitalize off them, and that's what Drake is doing. And then he named various examples of Drake collaborating with Black men in the industry to basically gain popularity. And then once he's done with appropriating that style, he'll go on to like the next genre or the next big thing. So he's done dance hall and R&B and pop and all this other stuff. But in the same token, he turned around and called Black people slaves. He said that Kendrick sounded like he was trying to free the slaves. So there's a lot of controversy around him, and so people really banded together with that under the auspice of "They Not Like Us," because I guess a lot of people identify with like how non-Black people will appropriate our culture, but turn around and call us like ghetto or classless if we do the same things. Like you'll see nails becoming really popular now, right? Or people using African American vernacular and doing it wrong. So yeah, it's a great song, Nana Linda. I'm gonna send it to you. It's very
Okay.
you're ready to dance if you won't. Just let
Well,
the
I've heard about the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. I didn't know about it. I mean, I don't know the details of it, but someone in that comment, someone raised a question, well, what were some of the songs back in the day? And what popped into my head, and I don't remember who it was, Get on the Love Train. um, a lot of, but clearly what also was part of that movement was Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? That entire album, if you want to know something about our cultural heritage relative to liberation songs, he was raising the question, what's going on? And people heard that message and we tried to figure out what in the hell is going on. so Mercy, Mercy. There's just so many songs because that's kind of what we do. We transform our cultural heritage in such a way through the music, through the beats, through the melodies, and the energy, because we've understood historically, even though now it's just beginning to be confirmed by Western science, that those rhythms really do ignite endorphins that can really help elevate that joy and that energy and mitigate against some of the cortisol that would keep us depressed and down. So we'll have to thank the listener for bringing that issue to the fore.
It's been said that every revolution has a song, and that's because music and the messaging through music is a way to speak to the inner soul. And I think that what's gotten lost in our culture is what my friend Elder Atum refers to as the prophet motive. Uh, and that's a distinction between, um, when I say profit motive, it's PROPHET, profit. Uh, the profit motive has been replaced by, in our culture, the profit motive that everything is about what makes you more money. And so people are driven to do what makes money, and it gets them away from using music as a tool to advance a cause, to advance society. But music can still do that, you know. It has that power. We just have to, um, you know, remind the music makers uh, that their consciousness is important in their work and work product, what they produce. So we'd be looking at, you know, what is the consciousness behind what is being produced, and what is that leading to? Because it is often through music and art and dance that we communicate the cultural themes that need to be in place to bind the people together.
So music can be used again diunitally for the good or for the bad. And we know, at least from the 70s, there have been those people who have spent a lot of time figuring out how can we create music that will make people anxious and depressed and angry and frustrated. That music's out there too. But that's not our music. That's not our cultural tradition. But
But it was also music of the 60s and 70s that led, you know, the Black Revolution, you know.
long tradition.
Some people just don't know what they're doing. They're making money, but they don't know what they're doing.
Well, you know, I think the point you make about profit, PHET versus FIT, is so critical, because at this juncture, PROFIT is worldwide and universal, and the puppet masters are committed to that, and they don't care about anybody. They don't care about their own mother. If there's profit to be made, she's under the bus with everybody else. If there's a nation to be destroyed, hey, what up? I'm global. I'm just moving on to the next juncture. So as Black people, we kind of realize this is a pattern. And when you have a pattern, you have to acknowledge the pattern so you know how to move to avoid being consumed by that pattern. Unfortunately, not enough of us have had that realization. So we keep getting more and more lessons, harder and harder lessons. But at some point, our humanity is going to emerge and say, hold up, enough is enough. Got to go another way. But those forces that have brought the destruction will have played out in terms of what they're here to do. And we have the chance then to move on. But I think what Dr. Hickson said is so very important. At some point, we have to stop worrying about what they do, because they're going to do what they've always done. We don't have to figure that out anymore. It's kind of a pattern. What we need to focus on is, what are we going to do? And how are we going to do it? And how can we strengthen our cultural heritage? And I'm so happy to hear the youngins, as I would call them at this juncture, are doing the do. I love it, love it, love it.
And having fun with it.
Ah, great time. But there's also a lot of pain. And so for those people who have lost everything, that's a hard lesson. That's a hard lesson. When you have built your whole life and made it so beautiful and so glorious, and you've enjoyed it, and now it's gone. You're not the only one. You're not the only one. So many people have lost everything, but oftentimes what we see among Black people who lose everything is that resilience. Resilience comes back, and we will triumph. What we want to be able to also see is that, what did I learn from this? Nothing in the material realm lasts forever. By nature, it is finite and limited. Anything in the material realm can only last for so long. It's time limited. It will expire, including our bodies. So, expanding consciousness, elevating our consciousness so we can realize, there is something greater than ourselves. And that which is greater than ourselves is all powerful, ever present, all knowing. I contend through optimal psychology, its nature is love, the source of all good. And if we can roll with that, we'll be fine. We will be fine.
And we have to remember that we are a part of that something that's greater than ourselves, and that we can contribute to what it has to offer for the future. And that's what our role is now in this corporal existence, is to contribute to that which is greater than ourselves. So that's why we're here.
Also, when we say that which is greater than ourselves, we have to be understanding that that is ourselves. As we expand our consciousness to the realization that that which is beyond me is me.
It's not.
We don't want to get to, it's not separate. It's not out there or up there somewhere. In here. In here. As above, so below.
Yeah.
It's a simple statement to make. It's a simple concept to put out there, but it's so misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was reflecting on the last Creating Zola Mondays we did, which hasn't been posted yet. But I'm going to post all of them shortly with the support of Candace, our wonderful marketing personnel who's supporting us now with this new platform, because again, Meta be hating. But I was reflecting on our last conversation, Nana Linda, and just thinking about how, like, trying to make sense of all the tragedy that's going on, like worldwide, including the personal loss of my little cousin. And I think that I had to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be able to make complete sense of it, but I do know that it is in service of something good, so that I feel like I'm constantly having to go through spiritual deaths or ego deaths to come out better on the other side of it. So like I had to reason or rationalize that that was part of my evolution, like experiencing that loss in the physical sense, in the spiritual sense, in the emotional sense, relationship wise, and questioning a lot of the connections that I have. So I think that this is really, like we keep referring to, the age of Aquarius, because everything's just coming up and I feel like we're having to purge everything. And I love also how you read framed what's going on with this current administration, about how, yes, things are, part of my language, shit is hitting the fan, like everything is collapsing. We are, I feel like, not about to be this great Western power that we've, raped and pillaged to become. And that's because, like you said, right, people are from the outside will have to come to consciousness that what Trump is doing and that administration is doing is wrong. And maybe this is ushering in the fall of this Western ideological, imperialistic, colonialistic, capitalistic system. So I'm just giddy about that. I'm not happy about all the pain and strife that people are experiencing and the loss of life that we're seeing and the threats to our humanity. But I am happy to see that people are waking up, essentially, and catching up to what Black people have already known.
Absolutely true. And each of us has our own role to play at this time. That's why we're here at this time and place. And the beauty is we have a choice, because there's always the two paths. And we can go the path of Ma'at, which is truth, justice, and righteousness. Or we can go the path of Isfet, which is destruction and domination and violence. And we choose. And the beauty of that choice is, once we make the choice for the greater and higher good, then we get to experience the greater and higher good. Once we make the choice for Isfet, we get to experience what that has to offer. So the power always lies within us. And so much is happening that looks so horrific. It also looks as though the powers that be are planning to create even more horrific experiences for more people. But if people can come together, if we can begin to see those among us who share like values and have values that honor truth, justice, and righteousness, and want to see greater good for everyone, not just an elite few, and want to be in harmony with nature and want to be mindful of future generations and all of those things that are characteristic of the wisdom tradition of Al-Kibilon deep thought, then we will be fine. And that's what's gonna happen. That's the Aquarian age. The dawning of Aquarius isn't to destroy, but actually to elevate and uplift. And so we'll be able to ride that out and see the triumph on the other end. What is it Martin said? The arc of justice moves in our direction, yes.
Bends towards, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice.
So this is Black History Month. We're blessed to be here to have this conversation. I hope that we're not cut off because we have been uncensored in terms of what we're about and the values we share. And I think that's what's important in terms of creating Zola Monies. Our intention here is not to slam anybody or be derisive or to negate, but rather to uplift and to elevate and really, 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 really commit to that love, that productivity that will lead to health and sustainable well-being for everyone on the planet, not just a few. And to inspire people to stand for truth, inspire people to feel they're not alone, inspire people to confront whatever's come into their experience as an opportunity for growth and development, and link arms with others who've also had similar experiences, and be still and know that there is a creative life force within which we are and which is within us. And that connection can never be dissolved. Actually, the only way it can be dissolved is our lack of faith. My people, again, are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And we want to encourage people to go for positive belief in something that is worthy of positive belief and let go of fear, because it's the intention of some powers that be to instill fear in us. And we know a lot about fear being instilled, particularly those of us who are descendants of the chattel enslaved who had no human rights whatsoever for generations. Somehow that fear that was intended, it just went boop. And we're here to talk about it, because had we taken it into our hearts, we would not have made it. We would not have made it. And so we don't want it to impact us now when we're on the upside of the evolution of history.
Ashay. I don't see any questions, comments, or concerns, so I think we're good to close out, Nana Linda. If anyone else has any closing remarks, I'm super excited. Thank you so much, Candace, who y'all can't see. She's in the background, for getting us started on this platform. We've been talking for years about going forward with something like this where we can stream on multiple platforms. And then I see some options, to play music and do things like that, which we originally started with because we know how powerful the musical vibrations are, especially from Black artists. So thank you, Candace. I don't have anything else to say. I'm just so excited to move forward. I don't know about you, Nana Linda, Dr. Linder.
Just one closing thought that I have, which is please, please, please support the Association of Black Psychologists. The Association of Black Psychologists has been with us coming out of the late 60s. And we have 50 years plus under our belt, and we've always been committed to illuminating the human spirit intergenerationally. So please, please, please support us. See the ways in which you can support the organization. It's comprised principally of professional psychologists. And the reason that's important is because we would not be here today in the situation we are as this nation and the global society if the teachings of Black psychology had been prevalent. It's that Euro-Western psychology and what it's been teaching that has to hold some accountability for the morass that we're experiencing today. There's a reason why almost a little over a majority of people in the society made decisions that really were not in their best interest relative to what was being offered. So that clarity of mind, those cultural roots, we're not saying are exclusive. We're saying they are universal. Also, in terms of the Association of Black Psychologists, we're not a monolithic organization. It happens that people you're hearing today on Creating Zola Mondays, we tend to agree, but there's diversity. There's at least 3 schools of thought within Black psychology as identified by Maulana Karenga. There's the traditional school, which is a bit more mainstream, Euro-Western. There's the revisionist school. And then there's a radical school of thought. And so all of those are extant within the association. But I think being of the radical school, I'm for really shifting our consciousness and expanding it beyond that which we have been socialized. So I see we have a post here. We will be hosting Sawubona healing circles throughout the month of February. Check out the National Lady Sai on Instagram for more details. Sawubona means I see you. I see the divinity in you. And I can see the divinity in you because I see the divinity in me. We are truly one. So much good, so much knowledge, wisdom, and understanding we can impart when we begin to not deny our Black history or access to that Black history, not to deny our Black cultural heritage, but rather embrace it for what it is, which is the absorption of all the energies of the spectrum into one. So peace and blessings, peace abide. Until the next time.
Ashe.